All right, now climate change is part of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, but we found out in a new report for 2024, only 17% of those targets are on track, with nearly half making minimal progress and over a third stalled or regressing. You've got a number of challenges we're going to get into with our guest, Naomi Nwokolo, Executive Director, United Nations Global Compact Network, Nigeria. Naomi, good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. Last time we had you, you were in New York City, and now here you are in Lagos. So why is it that we're not going to get, it doesn't look like 2030 is realistic for these Sustainable Development Goals?
Yeah, thank you. According to it's good to be here and good to see you. So according to the report, the SDG Stocktrade report that was shared, we are actually regressed on the SDGs. About only 17% are currently on track. And this is due to the issues that have happened. The COVID-19 came and really resources were allocated to really taking care of people and making sure they survive as opposed to the SDGs. So that put us backwards. And also the current political crisis in the world has really affected hunger, healthcare, and poverty is on the rise. So now there's a need for us to really double up efforts on achieving the SDGs, even in Nigeria and other parts of the world. So given that, there's a renewed call for hope. At the just concluded UN General Assembly held in September, the Secretary General called for the adoption of the UN Pact for the Future. We called for a robust engagement between private sector, public sector, even multilateral organizations to double up efforts for the achievement of the SDGs. So we're not on track, but there's more to be done, and every part of society is involved and have a role to play.
All right, look, we've got a war in Ukraine. We've got Israel just apparently reportedly killed the Hezbollah's spokesperson. There's all kinds of stuff going on. We've got inflation numbers in Nigeria that are rising, cost of living How do you attain these goals with everything that's happening? Geopolitical concerns, cost of living, and so on and so forth. You guys have work to do, man.
I mean, we all, even you and I excluded.
Okay, I'm part of it.
Yes. Everybody,
we have work.
We have work. Everybody has a unique role to play. I mean, in taking actions on the SDGs, we need to look at prioritizing equity and diversity and equity for the vulnerable groups, including women and youths and children. We also have to look at the issue of financing for the SDGs. We've had a lot of conversations on how we can get into this financing. We need to give agency to local governments. The Office of the Special Advisor to the President on the SDGs is not the only office that can address SDG issues. So we need to give agency to local government states on how they can implement SDG issues and SDG solutions that are relevant to their various organizations. Importance of various states. Also the importance of public-private partnerships. We do not want to exclude that. Everybody, like I said earlier, everybody has the role to play. And that's where the unique role of the United Nations Global Compact comes into play. Like we put the private sector at the forefront of our definitely the SDGs. They have to really include the SDGs as part of their corporate strategy and begin to set targets on how to achieve them. So when we begin to do that, I think we'll be on the pathway. But for now, we just continue to mobilize the private sector in that regard. So just to mention, in September of 2024, the UN Global Compact on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly launched the Forward Faster initiative. And that was to mobilize the private sector in Africa to set targets on core SDG issues like SDG financing, gender equality, water resilience. There's a water crisis at the moment. So if we continue to have private sector commit to these targets and set realistic goals, then we'll be on the pathway.
All right, so I like playing with words a lot. If you look at the strap on the bottom of our screen, it says UN Sustainable Development, and UN stands for United Nations, right? Yeah. But if you join UN to sustainable, you get unsustainable goals. So if a corporation says, Mr. Nwokolo, this is not sustainable, how can I as a business integrate all these things you're asking for within my business practices? What would you say to that private sector player?
I mean, that's the work that we do at the Global Compact to help them, guide them through achieving the SDGs. So when you look at the corporate strategy, you look at what particular SDG is peculiar to your sector. If those in the water sector need to take actions to address the water challenges, those in the finance sectors have to look at the risk and how to embed sustainable finance into addressing SDG solutions. So it all has to do with the sector specific. So when you set it out, you look at how SDGs apply to your sector, you begin to target your goals and set your goals and how to achieve them. So we have launched in the past our SDG Action Manager on how to direct the private sector towards implementation. And it's really tricky because in the Nigerian business landscape at this time, people are struggling to survive. So it's difficult to talk about sustainability when a business is trying to survive.
That's right.
So you want to really highlight business survival, then business success and sustainability. So it's hard, but we cannot exclude sustainability from the equation because ESG has to be implemented one way or the other. You look at the issue of living wage. The government, the trade union are talking about living wage. We are talking about minimum wage. We are talking about living wage because is minimum wage really enough?
Right.
So we as a Global Compact institutions continue to have this conversation to spur private sector to action, to spur even the government to take actions on these core issues.
We had Narendra Modi in Nigeria just yesterday. He and President Tinubu are off to Brasilia for the G20. There's going to be a lot of talk around investment. There's a lot of talk around the number of Indian companies that are in Nigeria investing, creating jobs. So as far as SDGs, I bring that up to ask you how Nigeria can attract or mobilize the necessary financing to make these goals possible.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting question. And one thing I'll have to say is that the need for us to work on our policy frameworks. No one is going to come and invest in a country where there's no strong institution.
Right.
You know why the World Bank Structural Adjustment Policy failed in 1986?
Because some of the intricacies of SAP were not realistic or they were too stringent.
Good. Another important factor is the lack of the inclusion of the rule of law. So if you do not include the World Bank thought efficient markets will lead to prosperity, right?
But they forgot.
Yeah, but you forget that without the inclusion of the rule of law, there will be no efficient market. Even efficient market is dependent on the rule of law.
Right.
So for Nigerian government to begin to attract those foreign investment, we need to work on our governance policies. We need to also look at transparency and compliance so that when investors look at how transparent you are and how you have good governance policies, they want to really invest. Important to also look at the aspect of blended finance, which is what we discussed at COP. I just returned from Baku 2 days ago. There's the issue of blended finance. They need to attract multilateral development institutions to come invest in your country. We also look at the debt swaps. How the money is the debt we are owing a lot. How can we translate them into investing in SDG core related projects? Public-private partnership is not excluded in the equation. We need to begin to work with the private sector. Governments cannot do it alone. We know that. Right. The private sector, I would say, with working with them, they're ready.
Right.
But government have to create an enabling environment. The ease of doing business in Nigeria is bad. So we need to begin to work on those policies, pave way for public-private partnerships, and then we could say we are making progress. We can also, it's also important to look at the foreign direct investments and positioning Nigeria's potential in sectors like renewable energy.
Right.
You know, when we continue to do that, we have all these international conferences. Nigeria should be there, putting themselves out. There was, I don't want to really go into what I saw, but but there were situations like that where we need to position ourselves.
We're a fossil fuel nation, so, you know, it's a balancing act. Look, I thank you. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us here in Lagos. And look, there's a whole lot that's going on in 2025, so hopefully we have you back to see how things move along with these sustainable development goals, which are very, very important. So, Naomi Nwokolo, Executive Director, United Nations Global Compact Network, Nigeria, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. Before I leave, I just want to continue to appeal to the private sector, the businesses in Nigeria, to join the United Nations Global Compact to work towards adopting our principles in our bid to create a sustainable future.
Well, you can go visit them, right, and go market it. So, thanks for